the Attorney General was making some comments about the Chauvin verdict. Let's listen.
I know such wounds have deep roots, and that too many communities have experienced those wounds firsthand. Yesterday's verdict in the state criminal trial does not address potentially systemic policing issues in Minneapolis. Today, I am announcing that the Justice Department has opened a civil investigation to determine whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. This effort will be staffed by experienced attorneys and other personnel from the Justice Department Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota. The new civil investigation is separate from and independent of the federal criminal investigation into the death of George Floyd that the Justice Department has previously announced. Congress gave the department the authority to conduct civil pattern or practice investigations, which look beyond individual incidents to assess systemic failures. Those investigations allow the department to determine whether a police department has a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. The investigation I am announcing today will assess whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of using excessive force, including during protests. The investigation will also assess whether the MPD engages in discriminatory conduct and whether its treatment of those with behavioral health disabilities is unlawful. It will include a comprehensive review of the Minneapolis Police Department's policies, training, supervision, and use of force investigations. It will assess the effectiveness of the MPD's current systems of accountability and whether other mechanisms are needed to ensure constitutional and lawful policing. Broad participation in this investigation from the community and from law enforcement will be vital to its success. The Justice Department has already begun to reach out to community groups and members of the public to learn about their experiences with the MPD. We also seek to hear from the department's officers about the training and support they receive because their perspective is essential. All these voices will help provide investigators the information they need to conduct a comprehensive assessment. All these voices will be critical to the reform efforts that will follow if the investigation determines the existence of constitutional or statutory violations. If the Justice Department concludes that there is reasonable cause to believe there is a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing, we will issue a public report of our conclusions. The Justice Department also has the authority to bring a civil lawsuit asking a federal court to provide injunctive relief that orders the MPD to change its policies and practices to avoid further violations. Usually when the Justice Department finds unlawful practices or patterns of practices, the local police department enters into a settlement agreement or a consent decree to ensure that prompt and effective action is taken to align policing practices with the law. Most of our nation's law enforcement officers do their difficult jobs honorably and lawfully. I strongly believe that good officers do not want to work in systems that allow bad practices. Good officers welcome accountability because accountability is an essential part of building trust with the community, and public safety requires public trust. I have been involved in the legal system in one way or another for most of my adult life. I know that justice is sometimes slow, sometimes elusive, and sometimes never comes. The Department of Justice will be unwavering in its pursuit of equal justice under law. The challenges we face are deeply woven into our history. They did not arise today or last year. Building trust between community and law enforcement will take time and effort by all of us. But we undertake this task with determination and urgency, knowing that change cannot wait. Thank you.
All right, you were just listening there to the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, talking about the events that have unfolded in Minneapolis, specifically the verdict yesterday, but of course, over the course of the last year. Let's bring in our Jeff Pegues to talk to us over the phone about what we just heard. Jeff, so for our viewers who are trying to understand exactly what the Attorney General's comments mean, explain to them what it means when the federal government, in this case the Justice Department, decides to open an investigation into practices of a police department in a specific municipality.
Well, these pattern or practice investigations used to be something that the Obama administration did fairly regularly. From a historical perspective, the Obama administration used it as a tool to change and reform police departments in cities like Ferguson, Missouri, that had seen a pattern of alleged discrimination. And so when you have a pattern or practice investigation, the first step is going to be conducting a thorough and independent investigation to expose any persistent patterns of misconduct within a specific police department. In this case, it's the Minneapolis Police Department. And so the Department of Justice will do this investigation, and then if it finds patterns of misconduct, then it will offer remedies to fix some of these patterns of misconduct. And so the fact, Vlad, that you had the Attorney General making this announcement, it shows how intent this Justice Department is on sending a message to law enforcement that is essentially contrary to what the Trump administration was doing. In fact, the Trump administration essentially stopped doing these pattern or practice investigations. It was moving away from what the Obama administration had been doing to bridge the gap between community and police. In fact, you know, the Trump administration was widely known as an ardent supporter, and former President Trump was certainly in the statements that he made, of law enforcement. He backed law enforcement. That was the message that he wanted to send, and that was the message that the Department of Justice was sending under, certainly, former Attorney General Barr, who at one point stated that, essentially, that, listen, if these communities don't appreciate law enforcement officers, then they might find that they won't have law enforcement officers, something along those lines. It was one of those statements that really caught our attention because it just seemed so harsh in the environment where there are a lot of police departments at that time that were trying and are still trying to bridge the gap between police. And so, you know, back to your original question, this pattern of practice investigation will be interesting to see what it finds, because the chief here, Daria Arredondo, he was brought in as one of those reformers. He was widely recognized across the country as a top police official who was interested in reforming a police department like the Minneapolis Police Department, even though he was not an outsider. He has built his career here in Minneapolis, and yet he was chosen as someone who could be a reformer. And so it will be interesting to see what the pattern or practice investigation reveals. As you know, Vlad, you followed this Floyd case since the beginning, and the precinct in which Derek Chauvin worked, it was widely known throughout this city, and certainly in the neighborhoods around that precinct, to be one of those precincts where there was not this good, positive feeling between the community and the officers who worked in that precinct. And also keep in mind that was the precinct that was burned down in the days after George Floyd's death. So this is a move that the Department of Justice is making to send a clear message, not only to the Minneapolis Police Department, but also to other police departments across the country. So this is a new Justice Department. It's not like the Justice Department that was under the leadership of Bill Barr.
You mentioned Ferguson and the investigations that occurred after Michael Brown was killed there into whether or not Michael Brown's civil rights were violated, but also into the practices of the police department there. The Attorney General said that, if there is a problem that is discovered, then the police department would enter into a consent decree with the Justice Department. What does that look like? Does that mean, federal oversight? And, do these things work? Can you give, I don't know if you have any examples, I don't know what happened in Ferguson or elsewhere where the federal government came in to help a police department reform and it changed things for the better?
Well, I think Ferguson is the perfect example. When you look back, and I remember that report that was produced by the Pattern or Practice investigation into Ferguson. I remember it vividly because what it outlined was how certain police tactics can weigh on a community, can drive wedges between community and police. For example, Ferguson, Missouri had a majority Black population and still has a majority Black population. However, prior to Michael Brown's death, there was maybe one police officer of color on that force. The police officers who worked in the force did not live in the community. And then the city of Ferguson was raising revenue by writing tickets on people in this community who could least afford to pay those tickets. And so you had that on top of the type of police tactics where Blacks were essentially being singled out. Blacks were being pulled over at a rate several times higher than whites in that community. So it was pretty obvious what was going on there and why the law enforcement professionals who went in there and examined the practices, the patterns and practices in that city and in that department, it was pretty obvious what the problems were. And so once the investigation concluded, there was a negotiated agreement with the federal government to change, to reform that police department. If you look at the police department today, there is a Black chief there. They've increased the number of Black officers on staff. And not that that is the answer to every police department's ills and every community's ills. However, it leads to a different type of thinking, if you will, that also led to different tactics in the community, including the way tickets are handed out to communities that can least afford to pay those tickets. Because, and it seems like a small thing, but just think about how these tickets that can sometimes be costly can add up. And in a lot of cases, the people who can least afford to pay these tickets, they don't pay them. And so they end up behind bars in jail. And then you can see how that leads to a cycle. A downward cycle. You can lose your job. There are all sorts of ramifications that can happen if you wind up in jail because you just didn't have the money to pay the ticket. And frankly, that is an issue in cities across this country where politicians have refused to go to the voting booth, to the voters, and raise and take the tough stance of, listen, we're going to have to raise your taxes to pay for this, to pay for that. Instead, they choose to put it all on police officers to raise revenue. And so instead of fighting crime, police departments become revenue sources, where commanders encourage officers to spend their time writing tickets essentially raising money for city operations.